came to my house when I had a cold. Yeah, that was since then. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our workshop. To let everybody know what our schedule is today, we have a workshop, and then the board will have 2 attorney-client sessions, and then we will have our regular board meeting. So, Mrs. Bass, please call the roll.
District 1, Barbara McQuinn. Here. District 2, Chuck Shaw.
Here.
District 3, Karen Brill. Here. District 4, Erica Whitfield.
Here.
District 5, Frank Barbieri. Here. District 6, Marcia Andrews.
Here.
District 7, Deborah Robinson.
Here. Let the record show all 7 board members are here. We will do the pledge during our regular meeting. So our first topic tonight is a workshop on security. Dr. Fenoy.
Board members, as Chief Operating Officer Wanda Paul and Sergeant David Nisison come to the table, they're going to give you a brief update on where we're at in preparations for next year. I think it's also appropriate time to introduce to you Frank Kitzrow, who is on the agenda later this evening for appointment as our new Chief of Police. Chief Kitzrow has been the Jupiter Chief of Police since 2005 and comes to the district with over 30 years of law enforcement experience under his belt. He is highly respected in our community, and I have great confidence in his ability to improve and sustain our interagency relationships as we navigate through the requirements of the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas Safety Act. He is taking on the role as Chief of Police as the department is getting ready to double in size, and I am excited about his vision for school police. I'd actually like Chief Kitzrow to introduce himself to the board at this time.
Thank you, Dr. Fenoy, and thank you for those kind words. I'm humbled to be before all of you today on such an important occasion, and I really can't thank you enough for your support. I can tell you that the magnitude of this assignment and the magnitude of what the job is ahead of me is not lost on me at all. So I'm very appreciative of that. I'm also pretty excited about becoming part of the school board team. As you know, I've been around for a little bit and plan on leveraging some of the relationships and the school police chiefs the police chiefs and others to carry us into the future. And actually, the most excited I am about everything is getting to work with the men and women of the Palm Beach County School Police Department, both sworn and not sworn, because I'll tell you, those folks are nothing short of amazing. And we hear so much in the news right now about everything, but there's no news about them every day bringing hundreds of thousands of students on our campus and taking them off the campus and being there all day and providing for safety for them all day long. So that, to me, is a huge task. I'm really proud to join that team. I'm looking forward to contributing and building on successes. And most of all, I appreciate the trust that you have in me, and I promise you that I will do everything in my power not to let you down and do the very things we need to do to become an agency that goes to the next level of excellence. And thank you for your faith in me, Dr. Fenoy. I appreciate that.
Well, thank you, sir. I'd actually, if you wouldn't mind coming forward and shaking the hands of the board members, I would greatly appreciate that.
Certainly.
And board, I just want to let you know that Chief Kitzrow will officially begin his work after tonight's vote with the district on July 2nd. And at this time, I will turn it over to Sergeant Nisison and Ms. Wanda Paul.
Okay. And Chief, it's an honor to work with you. So we're going to do great things for the city. All of our municipalities, working with them, as well as our schools and our teachers and staff. And as you know, our schools are safe because of the quality of officers that you have in Jupiter, in our police department, and our other municipalities. So I thank you very much for coming on board. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, Chairman Shaw, Vice Chair Dr. Robinson, and board members. It is always an honor to get before you to give you updated information. The focus, as said previously by Dr. Fenoy, is on safety and security. So first of all, I wanted to make you aware, and some of you are probably already aware, but these are the requirements it takes to become a school police officer. So you can see that they have to have their certification from the law enforcement officer, as a law enforcement officer. They have to have 2 or more years of experience as a law enforcement officer at another agency. U.S. citizen, must be a U.S. citizen, high school diploma, no felony arrest, and no domestic violence in their history. So as you can see, we have pretty stringent standards for our school police officers. Also, I wanted to give you an idea of kind of the demographics for our police department. And as you can see, we're diverse. When you look at the years of experience, we have predominant officers that have been law enforcement officials in cities and so forth, and they choose to come to the District of Palm Beach County. And then you can look at the educational level of our officers. So I'm going to turn it over to Sergeant Nissison that talks about school police training.
Good afternoon. I'm going to go over some of the training issues that we have with the police department. Probably going back about 14 years now, post Columbine shooting, we redirected the training that our officers were doing. We've been conducting active shooter training or active killer training for upwards of 14 years now, every year with our police officers. We're probably way ahead of the game as for the majority of the agencies, probably around the state, other than other school district police departments, primarily because the environment that our officers are working in requires us to be up on active shooter training. We conduct a variety of active shooter training. For instance, this year we'll be doing 2 different phases of active shooter training. We'll be doing single officer response training, which requires all of our officers to go through 20 hours of training. It's 2-day training, and then further on in the training cycle, we'll be doing multi-officer active shooter training, and also working our officers through stairwells and hallways, searching for threats. Part of the whole process with training our officers for active killers is also included in our firearms training. Our officers are required to do firearms training every year as well. During the summer months, we conduct in-service training with our officers. They receive approximately 160 hours of training during the summer for the most part, and then there's additional training going on during the year that we conduct online training through our video training program. The firearms training that we do is also infused with the active shooter training. The officers are trained on a large amount of movement drills. It's not just qualifying with their weapons. And all the movement drills and skill sets that we give the officers each year during the firearms training fits in line with the active shooter training or the active killer training that we conduct, so that the officers are capable of moving through the hallways and engaging a target, knowing the background that we may face. And the background obviously is children, so we're very concerned over that. So we blend that training in with our officers. Additionally, we train our officers in not only the state defensive tactics program that we're required to do, which is handcuffing, use of OC spray, escorts and such. We also conduct, and we've been doing this for quite a number of years now, we conduct an advanced defensive tactics program, which gives our officers a little bit of an edge in dealing with very, very violent offenders where they may not necessarily be able to use a firearm to subdue them, and they'll be able to go hands-on with them to effect an arrest or to stop any particular threat that they're engaged in. Additionally, encompassing all of that training, we also train our officers regularly on de-escalating, verbal de-escalation. It's an important aspect in what we're doing, again, because of the environment that our officers are working in. Our officers, it's not the same as working out on the street, which a majority of our officers have done, where most of us have come from other agencies. The de-escalating training is an important part of what we do, again, because we're dealing with children and parents that may be coming in onto our campus that may be in some form of crisis. We also do extensive training with our officers in autism, in dealing with children, autistic children, or any of the children that may be on the spectrum. We do that training regularly because, again, because our officers are in contact with all of them. It's important for our officers to be familiar with how to deal with children that are on the spectrum as opposed to what would be a mainstream student. Our officers are trained in CPR, first aid, as well as we've included the use of tourniquets. Recently, we've put our officers through training with tourniquets, and we've had all our officers equipped with tourniquets to be utilized in case we have an incident where we have victims, so they can attend to the victims. We're also incorporating the second portion of the active shooter training is also going to incorporate dealing with victims as the officers are moving through the hallways and the buildings looking for the threat. We are training them on dealing with victims as they move along. We keep all our officers up to date on all the legal updates. Our officers get extensive training in Baker Act. It's been it's a constant issue with us at the schools. We also have a contingency of our officers have been trained with rifles. The officers that are out and mobile in vehicles have been trained through the training unit to carry and utilize and deploy a rifle if necessary. The officers also conduct SEPTED training and threat assessment training, threat assessments at the schools to see if the schools are vulnerable in any areas. It's a constant thing that we do. The training unit itself conducts training for the staff around the district at the schools. We train the staffs on how to conduct themselves and what to do in the event of a critical incident takes place on the campus. We teach them to train the children what they're supposed to do, and this is done yearly. This is an ongoing process that we do. We train the staff on how to conduct the drills, what they're supposed to do, what we expect them to do during the lockdown process, and how are you going to train the children, how they're supposed to react, depending on what the environment is, whether it's an elementary school, middle school, or a high school. At this time, we've probably trained upwards of 3/4 of the principals, assistant principals, and leadership in crisis intervention training that we started a little over a year ago. There are a number of requirements for them. One of the requirements is teaching them how to develop the crisis plans for their individual campuses, which is a requirement each year. The training unit also reviews and handles all of those. Any issues that come up, security issues based on those reports, we'll go out to the site and we'll deal with those particular issues. The officers are also receiving training almost yearly, but as a matter of fact, tomorrow, all of our officers will be receiving training from NECMEC, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, as well as training on human trafficking. That training will be conducted tomorrow. They receive training on drug interdiction and gang interdiction, and on the non-tactical training, our officers are also given extensive training in hate crimes, juvenile sex offenders. We also give them an overview of terrorism, improvised explosive devices, and all of this training, again, fits in with any potential threats that go on the campus.
All right, Mrs. Brill.
Thank you, and you do a lot of training, it
Yes,
sounds.
ma'am.
But I do have a question for you. You touched on it very briefly with regard to principals and administrators, but I was told just yesterday that our officers are not receiving the crisis intervention training that they're supposed to be receiving. Can you address that?
Our officers, the police officers?
I was told that the crisis intervention training has not been going on.
I'm not exactly sure what you're speaking of. The crisis intervention training I was speaking of, we train the principals, the assistant principals, the leadership have been going through that specific training.
Just as a follow-up, then maybe, you know, somebody can get with the officers and get with PBA, because I was told the officers are not receiving that training and that they're supposed to get that training.
All of the training that we give the principals, the assistant principals, the leadership, all of that training, all of our officers, that training's infused with all of our officers throughout all of our training.
Thank you.
And keep in mind, not only during the summer months, we're in our summer training months, which usually runs about 160 hours of training. This year it's a little bit less because of some makeup days from the hurricane. But the officers also receive extensive training every month through our video training, which covers almost all of those aspects.
Mr. Barbieri and then Mrs. Whitfield.
Thanks, Sergeant. In the city of Boca Raton, the city commissioned some students from the high schools and the middle schools to come up with a report to the city council on what they felt were the situations in the schools dealing with a sense of insecurity. And I've talked to the superintendent about this. Hopefully, we can get them to do the presentation here to the school board. It's about a 15-minute presentation. But one of the concerns of the students was that when they have a code red, they always know it's a drill, and they don't take it seriously. They just walk around the school thinking, joking and laughing, knowing it's a code red drill instead of a real code red. Do we actually conduct code reds in the schools, code red drills in the schools, without the students knowing that it's a drill and it's not a real life situation?
Yeah, consistently, we've done that around the district. As of late, post-Stoneman shooting, because of the fear that a lot of the staff had around the school, as well as the students, there was a directive went out that all of the drills were going to be notified drills. I'm not sure if they're misunderstanding that from February until the end of school, that we were actually advising them when we were doing this. Not only lockdown drills, we were advising them if we were doing fire drills as well. The entire staff was being notified as well. I can't speak for all of the principals, but my contact with every school in the district before the year's out, I can tell you that I know of a lot of the principals that don't let their staff know that they're conducting a lockdown drill. We've modified the drills a little bit because we were having a lot of lockdown drills based on activity that was going on outside of the school. The West Palm Beach Police Department was chasing somebody around, and the schools were going down into an automatic code red lockdown, which shuts down the educational process. So we started tweaking it and doing our code yellow, which we can transition into a code red very rapidly. So that may be part of the problem, but we're trying to balance out the educational process with the lockdown process. We want the code red lockdown to be an absolute imminent threat, and everybody needs to participate in it. And I would suggest that it's very possible that some of the staff are not taking it as seriously as maybe they should. The police officers are a peripheral part of the lockdown process. We depend on the staff to conduct the lockdowns on the campus. The principals and the teachers are responsible to do all of the things that are needed to be done during that lockdown process. If the teachers are not taking it seriously, then when they close the door, if they're not doing the things that we're teaching them, that we're training them to do, and having them train the students what we're requesting they train the students to do, I'm not sure how much control the police department has over that. But it's definitely a valid question. I think we'd have to look at the individual schools. I can't think of any school off the top of my head where they're not taking it seriously. My interaction with the principals take it very seriously.
All right, so Mr. Superintendent, if we start this red drills again in the fall without notifying the staff and the students that it's a drill, can we make sure that school police, Mr. Niesels and his staff are there to view what's going on so that we can make sure that they're following all the protocols rather than being lazy about this and these kids are where they're supposed to be and the doors are locked and all those things? Because I just don't want to trust it to, I'm not suggesting a principal can't do it, but I'd rather you all that are trained to make sure these things go the way they're supposed to are there to observe so that you can make sure that we're doing the things we're supposed to do.
Actually, this summer, we're actually going to be instructing our officers to take a more of an active role in conducting the drills, monitoring the drills, and also evaluating the individual crisis plans. That is actually part of our training this summer.
All right, thank you.
Dr. Fenoy wanted to make a comment, and then Mrs. Whitfield, Mrs. Andrews, and Mrs. McQuinn, and Mrs. Brill.
Yes, I want the board, I think it would be appropriate to have Major Davis come to a closed session with the board to get into some of the specifics, what happens in schools. I want to be very mindful of us getting into too many specifics in the public forum. And so Major Davis really handles all the work at the school site. And so we'll bring him into a closed session so we can really pepper him with questions, and then we can get to the root of people taking it more seriously at the school site.
Mrs. Whitfield.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this presentation thus far. I appreciate it. So 2 questions. The first one is you mentioned the de-escalation procedures, and I'm assuming that may be a unique training for school police officers versus other police officers. I was wondering how many of these other training areas may be unique to being in a school setting rather than just a generalized policing service.
I'm not 100% sure that it's unique to our police officers. My previous agency, we conducted, I'm sure if you've heard of verbal judo, we were trained in that many years ago when I was with my other agency. We do it a little bit differently because our environment's different. We're primarily dealing with either children or young adults, as well as our staff too. So maybe the techniques are a little bit different. The focus of the police officers on the campus is our main focus is we're not there to put kids into the criminal justice system. We're trying to keep them out of it. So the conversations and the de-escalating that we have with them is more geared towards getting them wrapped right back into what they were doing prior to whatever crisis they were involved in. We also train, my unit trains, I don't know if you're familiar with the VITAL program. The district has a policy, every school is required to maintain an active VITAL team. VITAL stands for Violence Intervention Techniques and Language. It's a system that we created. It's a nonviolent form of restraining and de-escalating people. We have just about 4,000 practitioners right now all around the district at all the different schools. They actually have a team on the campus. So if we have a couple of students, just as an example, we have a couple of students that are bowing up at each other, say in the cafeteria, and it looks like they're getting ready to get into a physical altercation. They'll actually call the team that's on the campus, the VITAL team. They'll go over there. They're trained in de-escalating and intervention with the students, try and separate them and redirect them into better behavior for the day. If it gets to the point where there's an incredible amount of violence, they're trained to separate them, restrain them, and then move them to another place. And again, by doing that, by having the staff doing that, the trained personnel, again, it keeps them out of the criminal justice system. So they can handle that administratively and bring them right back into the educational process, which is what the goal is.
That's great. The other question I had was about youth mental health first aid. Have you guys been doing
Every one
that?
of our police officers has been trained in that. As our new officers come in, they will be trained in it as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Mrs. Andrews?
Thank you, and thank you for the training of our officers over the
ma'am.
years. I've been involved with school police, having been a school district administrator, so thank you for your work.
Thank
Where
you.
my concern rests right now is as we are working with the other agencies, the municipalities, as well as the MOUs, and trying to get these new officers to come in and fill the gaps until we can hire more school police officers. Where do you come in to make sure that these officers have this kind of training, especially many of them will be at the elementary level? So what is that plan?
Well, we've already initiated some training with all of the agencies around the county. We conducted some seminar training with the staff in regards to things that officers can expect when they come to the campus. That was the first step. We've been involved in mutual training with a lot of the agencies. We've been doing that consistently for many, many years. We're involved in mutual training with the Boca Raton Police Department, the Delray Beach Police Department, the Boynton Beach Police Department, Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office. We've been in contact with the Jupiter Police Department, Palm Beach Gardens Police Department. Everybody wants to start combining training. It probably wouldn't be a bad idea to give them a little bit more what I would call SRO training, so they understand some of the aspects of working in the school. It's a different world working in the school than it is out on the street, and we recognize it. We recognize it because we're school police officers, and we know. I'm not sure what they expect at this point of the training unit, but you bring them to the table, we'll feed them.
Mrs. Andrews?
And as I've heard, I don't know if this is correct, that many of these people that will be working overtime, sometimes it could be a different person in an elementary school on any given day. So there's no consistency as to whether you're going to have the same officer at a school each day of the week. Can you help me with that as we relate to making sure that these people have the necessary skills for training?
Well, can I answer
yes,
it,
ma'am.
if you don't mind, just part of the question? So our municipalities, our city police officers have been in our schools. They have relationships with the schools within their city. And so it's not like we're starting from scratch and having to build a whole program just for them. They're active participants. I met with the Palm Beach County Chiefs Association, had all the chiefs at the table, and I was surprised at the amount of interaction they currently at this stage have with our schools, and it's been built over many, many years. And so I think it's important to recognize the fact that, as they said to me poignantly, that, these are our schools too. And so I'll let you talk about kind of the training piece of that.
It's very true. I mean, going back some years, my only experience in working in the schools, I've only worked in one school in the district before I went into the training unit. It was the old Boca Raton High School. I know the Boca Raton Police Department actually had an officer from their agency actually was assigned at the school, working along with me probably three days out of the week. I know Jupiter Police Department is heavily involved in the schools. There's officers in the school. Delray Beach Police Department, heavily involved. Boynton Beach Police Department, as much as they can, with their manpower shortage. But we've always worked with all of these agencies through the training unit and through their training units, doing cross-training with them. We've been doing that as far back. I've been in the training unit for probably close to 15 years. We've been doing that kind of training with all of them. I'm not sure how to answer that question any better for you because, again, I don't know who's going to be showing up at the schools. So
it's about also building relationships. So one of the things that I pointed out or expressed when I met with the chiefs is that, it's important that the principals know who's coming to their school. So that's part of the scheduling aspect of it. So we realized that we're going to have to make sure that the principals are comfortable and understand kind of the process. So that's work that we're kind of scoping out now in terms of the best way to deal with it. But, when I brought it up in terms of, our schools are used to having the same person in the school every day, they said, well, we're already in your schools. And so I don't think that's a very hard stretch to get to, quite honestly.
Ms. Rico wanted to make a comment, and then Mrs. McQuinn.
Thank you. Just for the benefit of the board and Mrs. Andrews' question about the training and the specifics of the training, it is called for and called out specifically in the MOU that we developed. Those MOUs are now being circulated amongst the various municipalities, law enforcement. So those unique aspects of the DOJ training and other things that are unique to our overlay of school policing, and those training requirements are called out for in the agreement, so they will be specifically addressed in our training.
Mrs. McQuinn.
I'm actually going to save my question for our closed session with Major Davis, but I do want to ask Dr. Fenoy, it goes along with what Dr. Robinson said at our last meeting, is can we schedule something? We're not scheduled right now to meet in July, and I think this is very important. So can we make that a priority to have that meeting?
Staff will definitely look at that. I think it's also important for the board to know that Keith Oswald and his team have created a time on the back-to-school schedule specifically for safety training for all teachers, the administrators, and their teams. And so the police department is currently working on that as well. So there's really time dedicated specifically to that training. So in relation to your question, can we create a time for us to meet in July? We'll have to get with the board and get the schedules together, and we'll see what we can do, absolutely.
Mrs. Brill.
Thank you. Mrs. Andrew asked my questions.
Okay. All right.
It looks like we have time July 18th. We're scheduled to meet on July 18th, so we can figure out something there.
Okay. So that's firm then? Yes. Okay. July 18th. All right. Ms. Paul.
Okay, so I wanted to kind of give you a snapshot of the process that we are using to fill some of the new positions. And so you can see the volume of applications we reviewed. And really, we want, the best of the best of the best to be in our schools, obviously. And so you can see 294 applicants that were screened out that didn't meet our criteria. And then of the 294, 150 or 120 were screened in for interview. And so we've interviewed 87, with 36 going to background investigation, 33 additional applicants to be interviewed within the next 2 weeks. And here's the thing I want to emphasize again. They all hold certifications. So they all are certified. And that is so important to us. And I think as we move forward, this is a great place to work. And even though some think that we're really competing with the other municipalities, my view is that the word is already out on our school district, and people want to come here and work. A prime example is Chief Gitzero. So if we continue to make sure that we put officers in the pipeline and continue to recruit and continue to make this a great place to work, then I am quite sure that we will fulfill all of our vacancies, in spite of what's been said on TV and so forth. Because my personal experience is this is a great place to work. Our current state, we will continue to interview and hire officers until we're fully staffed. This is a continuous process. I would say it's similar to teachers. We're always recruiting, we're always looking for good teachers and so forth. So it's the same with police officer. The appointment of our new chief of school police and district security, Chief Gitzero, hopefully y'all will approve that at the board table today. And then also the onboarding of Chief Gitzero to make sure that he is given the time he needs to understand our district. And he's heavily involved with the schools or the Jupiter schools. So I think he kind of understands that now. But just how the inner workings of the police department is, and give him an opportunity to do his own assessment. So I wanted to talk to you about the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas Safety Act and elementary coverage. So as you can see, our municipalities with elementary schools have really stepped up. As our general counsel said, the security agreement is in their hands now and being socialized. They have to go through their same steps as we do in terms of approval process and so forth. But every municipalities in our county said they wanted to pitch in and help, and that has never wavered. And I want to thank them personally for just the love that they have for our kids, because they have truly shown this. And I have some that have called me and said, hey, you know, we can't do this number, but we can do this, and then they spend the next 10 minutes apologizing why they can't fulfill the whole requirement. And so I don't think we can ask for anything better. They have just truly exceeded my expectations going into this. And so I want to thank them for just stepping up. And then, of course, you have the sheriff's office that has offered up 10. And then we have other municipalities that don't have schools in their cities, but they're also trying to contribute. Our number to get to is 108. And I'm fully confident, I'm very confident that we'll get to that number. My message to you today is that, you know, every school will be covered for the start of school. This is a tremendous concern for our staff, for our teachers, for our kids. And so I don't think we have an option of not doing this. This is something that we will do. And then safety, again, as you know, we've tried to say in various forms, is everyone's concern, from the custodian on the campus to the teacher in the classroom, to our incredible clerks and admin assistants at the front desk. You know, this is everyone's concern. And so I think we've been kind of definitely shaken up by the tragedy at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, and it will forever change the way we think about our schools and security in our schools. So I think, you know, in conclusion, you know, I think that, you know, by choosing an incredible individual such as Chief Kitzero, we have shown that this is extremely the number one priority that we have going forward. Also, we're going to look at and have looked at the recommendations by the Council of the Great City Schools. They issued a report May 29th that gives us opportunities to look for improvement. And, you know, this is a continuous improvement cycle, so we have to be open to that. As I said before, the new chief will assess our current state of the school police department and make his own recommendations. And then also, you know, right now we're focused on the start of school and having a systemic approach to school safety. So the first day of school, you know, every morning I wake up with my vision of the first day of school. And that is that our kids are going to school, you know, some with little butterflies in their stomach and so forth, and teachers first day of class. But my vision of the first day of school is not one transportation call. I want a call where the bus got there a little bit early, and no issues with school safety. Our officers in our cities and our sheriff's department will be all standing tall, ready to start the day of school. And the only complaint I really want to hear is that why are we having hamburgers for the first day of school? You know, so I think that we are up to the task. I think that we have a committed staff. Our police officers, our school police officers are absolutely incredible. There are some things that we need to do for them, and we're in process of doing that. So in conclusion, you know, I think, you know, on one hand, I'm grateful to obviously get an opportunity to speak to y'all collectively as a group. And also I'm grateful that I have such a great caliber of peers and police officers that are standing by my side as we go forward and make the first day of school an amazing day for our kids, because that's really what it's about. So
Dr.
thank you.
Robinson and then Mrs. Andrews.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions that seem to be a little disjointed. But the first thing is, and going back to earlier, the training, just so that I'm clear, the Baker Act decisions on a campus, the law enforcement officer has to make that decision. Am I correct?
Yeah, the police officer is not going to Baker Act a student based on the wishes of one of the staff members at the campus. There's a criteria that the officers need to meet before they do the Baker Act. They're all familiar with it. They've been trained, and there's continuous training for them in regards to the Baker Act.
Okay.
I understand the question because we've run into some problems where some of the staff say, I want this child Baker Acted, but they don't meet the criteria, and it creates a little bit of a rift. But the police officers are aware of when they shouldn't Baker Act a student.
Okay. Now, I was actually just checking my memory because my memory said that only law enforcement officers and licensed medical professionals could Baker. Okay. So then the next thing is, okay, do we have lockdown drills? We talked about schools. Do we have lockdown drills at other buildings, bus compounds, this building? Do we have lockdowns at other drills at other places?
I'm not sure whether they've conducted lockdown drills, but I can tell you that my training unit has gone to all the bus compounds. We've trained staff at the bus compounds and at the shops where they service the vehicles on what they should do in the event of a critical incident. We've given them places where they should lock down. We reviewed the sites and gave them all the necessary options that we could find. And again, if they call us, we go back. If the supervisor wants some remedial training, we'll go and we'll do the remedial training. We also conduct training for all of the bus drivers each year. We give them an overview of safety and security issues that they may be confronted with while they're on the buses with the students as well. We do that every year. We also train the folks that do all of the maintenance work. We just finished conducting training for all of the custodians in the district. We've trained the MPO people, the electricians, the plumbers and carpenters. We pretty much are a one-stop shop for the district as far as training everybody in critical incident and mitigation.
Okay, just a couple more. Can we get a copy of the Council of Great Cities report?
I thought you had one, but I definitely can send you another one.
It's in an email somewhere? Yes, ma'am. Okay, I'll find it. Then on the sheriff's deputies, whatever the number is, will they be in unincorporated schools in unincorporated areas or municipalities that are already covered by the sheriff? I mean, will there be a correlation there?
Well, we are still working that particular aspect of the plan, so if you will give me a little while, a couple of weeks, I'll get back to you on that.
Okay, great. Then I also, since, everybody's showing love to all the municipal police departments, I just want to show some love to Riviera Beach and West Palm Beach. So West Palm is going to install the shot spotter, I understand.
Yeah, they've had that for a while.
Riviera has had it.
Yes, Riviera.
Right, but West Palm is apparently getting it, and so they want some assistance from us to make sure that this is them making sure that our schools are protected. So let's make sure we work with them. And then the last thing, and I know that this request is stretching limited resources thin, but it's my understanding from talking to young people that where they feel most unsafe is between home and school. And at one point in the past, the Riviera Beach Police Department had a specific focus on bus stops. So I'm just going to ask that in these conversations with law enforcement agencies and officers, that as school starts, that we see how we might work together to provide some additional eyes on that walk to the bus stop and walk from the bus stop. And at the bus stop, because that's where I understand young people feel most unsafe.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll
Mrs.
work with them
Andrews.
on that.
Thank you. And as I look at your the status of hiring of new officers, the data looks good. It seems like we're on the right track, so you're to be commended for that. But as you know, this data is fluid and it changes. Just as you're hiring anybody, it looks like you may have somebody and you don't, because they're looking at us. Palm Beach County is great, school district, but they may be looking at several other agencies. So you may think you have so many people in the pipeline, and then it may end up at the end you don't have as many. So one thing I'd like to see happen for this board and for me personally is an update on this, because this will change, and I would like to see these numbers as we move forward to the opening of schools, so that, as you said, on the first day, we can all be pretty excited.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Before Dr. Fenoy closes, just last week, some of the board members were at the Florida School Boards Association summer conference, and probably 95% of the conversations over there, at least that I had, were related to the school safety issues. And our county is so far ahead of where the rest of the state is. I was actually alarmed by some of the things I heard and the challenges that some of these school districts have. And we have the advantage, this is one of those times that size actually helps us, but some of the small districts are in really, really critical shape on dealing with this issue. And especially those districts that have chosen to not have certified officers, but going to the Guardian program and some of the challenges that they've had. I had a chance to talk to 3 different superintendents during that time who shared with me some of their things, as well as the Florida Labor Relations Service at our board meeting one morning, some of the challenges that districts are having with dealing with labor issues that are going to be there unique to their counties. So I thank you all so much for what you're doing and the potential that we have to be absolutely the model in the state of Florida. Dr. Fenoy.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Shaw. First, I'd like to say, prior to the horrific events of February 14, 2018, our school police department wasn't asked to be under the spotlight. And, I think for a long time, to be frank, they just did the work behind the scenes without a lot of fluff. And so now we were asking them to step forward and be the face of the district, so that people understand that we are in the process of creating a new reality. And so I thank all of the officers, the ones that I deal with every day. I want to thank, again, our new chief and all the new officers that are choosing to step up to the plate. And I think it's also important for our entire school community to understand that it's a different day. And when the grand jury report today, one of the statements that stood out to me from the grand jury report was that Palm Beach County schools are safe. And they're safe because of the men and women who have done an excellent job since the 1970s policing our schools. Do we have room for improvement? Absolutely. And we're going to do everything in our power to make sure our officers have everything they need to continue their job. And we thank Ms. Paul for her leadership. And so to this board and to everyone else, it is still a work in progress, and we'll keep pushing along. But thank you to all the men and women who serve the kids in Palm Beach County schools.
Thank you. That concludes our workshop. Our next topic is Dr. Robinson had a discussion item.
Yes, you will see attached